My wife cheated on me before the wedding, and I told her at the altar. I always thought love was enough. You know, the kind of love where you feel like nothing in the world could touch you. That was me. My name's Derek, and for years, Sophia was my world. From the moment I met her, I believed we had something special. She had this energy about her, like she could light up a room with just a smile. 5 years together, and I was sure, absolutely sure, that we were meant to be. I thought she felt the same. We were planning our wedding, and it was supposed to be the start of this perfect life we had been talking about for so long. We'd already set the date, picked out the venue, sent out invitations. Everything was falling into place. I was counting down the days, excited, maybe a little nervous, but in that good way, you know? Like, finally, I get to marry the woman I love. But life? Life has a way of sucker punching you right when you least expect it. I was supposed to come home from a work trip on Friday, just one day before the wedding. Sophia didn't know the project had wrapped up early, and I decided to surprise her by coming home a day ahead of schedule. I pictured her at home, probably stressing over last-minute wedding details, maybe going over the seating chart or trying on her dress one more time. I was looking forward to that moment. When I'd walk through the door, she'd see me, and we'd laugh about how close the wedding was. But when I got home, that's not what I walked in on. I opened the front door and felt a weird stillness in the house. At first, I didn't think much of it, just figured maybe she was in the bedroom. So I headed upstairs, a small smile on my face, excited to surprise her. But when I pushed open the door, that smile dropped, and everything I thought I knew about my life shattered. There was Sophia in our bed with Nick, and they were too wrapped up in each other to even notice me standing there. Nick, this guy I thought was just a casual acquaintance, someone Sophia knew through mutual friends. We'd crossed paths a few times, but I never thought anything of him. He was nobody, right? I trusted her. I trusted us. But there he was, and there she was, and I froze. I didn't move, couldn't speak. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. I couldn't even feel anger at first, just this heavy, sick feeling in my gut. Like everything I believed in, everything I was building my future on, was crumbling right there in front of me. I don't know how long I stood there, watching them. Could have been seconds, could have been minutes. Time didn't seem to exist anymore. But when they finally noticed me, it was already too late. The damage was done, the betrayal was real, and I could feel something inside me breaking. I wasn't the same person I was a minute ago. But here's the thing. Despite all the rage building up inside me, I didn't explode. I didn't scream or fight or throw them out. I just turned around, walked back out of the room, and left. I don't know how I stayed so calm. It felt like I was on autopilot, like my body was moving without me even thinking. But deep down, something had shifted. I knew I couldn't let this slide. There was no fixing what she did, no coming back from that. She had to pay for what she did. But I wasn't going to get into some messy fight right then and there. No, that would have been too easy. I needed her to feel the kind of pain that sticks with you forever. I got back in the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't think straight. It felt like the world had just flipped upside down, like everything I believed in was gone. The worst part wasn't even the cheating. It was the realization that everything I thought we had, everything I thought she was, had been a lie. I drove. I didn't know where I was going at first, just needed to get away. Eventually, I ended up by the river, parked in an empty lot with nothing but the sound of the water in the distance. I sat there for hours, staring out into the dark, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My thoughts were a mess, spiraling between disbelief and rage. The more I thought about it, the more the anger began to build. I couldn't just let this slide. I wasn't going to let her humiliate me and walk away like nothing happened. She had to feel the same kind of gut-wrenching betrayal that was tearing me apart right now. But I wasn't going to confront her like this, not yet. If I was going to do this, I needed to do it right. I pulled out my phone and typed a quick text to Sophia, Asterisk, I'll be back in a couple of hours. Asterisk, I needed her to believe I didn't know. I needed her to think everything was fine. So when I did finally walk through the door that night, I wore a smile like nothing had changed. When I finally drove back home, the sky had that deep midnight blue, the kind that feels heavy with silence. My mind was clearer now, though. I'd made my decision. Revenge wasn't going to be some wild confrontation or heated argument. No! I was going to make her pay in a way that would cut her deeper than she'd ever expect. And it would happen at the wedding in front of everyone. But for now, I had to keep playing my part. I walked through the front door like nothing had happened. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face calm. Sophia was sitting on the couch, her phone in hand, and when she saw me, she gave me this soft, relieved smile, like everything was perfectly normal. Like she hadn't just been with another man in our bed a few hours ago. "Hey, babe," she said, standing up to greet me. "I'm so glad you got here early." Her arms wrapped around me, and I could feel the warmth of her body against mine. For a split second, it made me sick, knowing where she had been, who she had been with. But I pushed it down. I couldn't let her see anything. Not yet. "I'm glad to," I said casually, pulling back just enough to meet her eyes. "Was able to finish the job early." She nodded, her eyes searching mine, probably looking for any sign that something was off. I had to be perfect, cool, unbothered. I kissed her on the forehead, just like I always did. The same routine. Nothing was out of place. "Did you get much done today?" I asked, my voice steady, like I hadn't just witnessed her betrayal. Sophia smiled, a little too brightly. "Yeah, mostly just some final touches for the wedding. You know how it is. Just a million little things left to handle." I nodded, pretending to listen, all while my mind raced. She was so good at acting normal, so convinced I had no idea. But it was fine. Let her think that. Let her think she was getting away with it. As the night went on, we went through the motions like a normal couple. We talked about the guest list, joked about the seating arrangements, even shared a glass of wine. Every time she laughed, every time she smiled at me, I felt this burning inside. How could she sit there, so comfortable, so calm, after what she did? But I didn't show it. I kept the mask on. We went to bed like we always did, her body curled into mine under the blankets. I could smell her shampoo, the same scent I had loved for years. But tonight, it felt different. It felt like a lie. I stared at the ceiling, my mind already working through the details of what was going to happen at the wedding. She had no idea what was coming. As I lay there, pretending to drift off to sleep, she whispered, "I can't wait to marry you, Derek." The words hung in the air, thick with irony, and all I could do was smile in the dark. "Me too," I whispered back, my voice as smooth as ever. But inside, I was counting down the days until everything she thought she had, her life, her future, would come crashing down. She wasn't going to walk away from this unscathed. She was going to feel every ounce of the pain she had inflicted, and it would all happen in front of the people who mattered most to her. In the days leading up to the wedding, I acted like everything was perfect. We laughed. We smiled for photos. We sat down with the wedding planner to make sure every little detail was in place. Sophia was in full bride mode, soaking up the excitement, talking about how it would be the best day of our lives. And I just nodded, played my role, letting her believe that everything was still on track. But in my head, I was already planning her downfall. I didn't want some petty argument or to just call off the wedding quietly. No, that would have been too easy. Sophia needed to feel the weight of her betrayal, and there was only one way to do that, publicly, in front of everyone. Her friends, her family, our co-workers. People who thought they knew her, who believed she was a sweet, loving woman about to marry the man of her dreams. I was going to make sure they all knew the truth. The idea took root while I sat alone at the river that night. It started as a small, burning thought. Asterisk, she ruined my life. Now I'll ruin hers. Asterisk, and the more I thought about it, the clearer my plan became. If she thought the wedding was going to be her perfect fairy tale ending, she was in for a rude awakening. I decided I wouldn't cancel anything. I'd go along with all the wedding plans like nothing was wrong. I'd show up with a suit, stand at the altar, and let her think that her big day was about to go off without a hitch. She would have no idea what was coming. The moment I chose for my revenge wasn't just any moment. It had to be during the vows, right when she expected to hear me say how much I loved her, how I'd be loyal to her forever. The same lies she'd been feeding me all along. I'd flip it on her, right there in front of everyone. I imagined the look on her face when I told the truth, when I revealed what she had done. The shock, the humiliation. She'd be standing there in her white dress, thinking she was walking into her happily ever after, only for me to pull the rug right out from under her. I'd thought through every detail. I wasn't just going to expose the affair. I was going to name names. Nick, that piece of shit who had been sleeping with her behind my back. I'd call him out right there, in front of everyone. Point him out in the crowd and let him feel the heat of the room turning against him. Sophia wouldn't just lose me that day. She'd lose her reputation, her friends, her family's respect. Over the next few days, I rehearsed what I would say in my head, crafting the perfect speech that would slice through her like a knife. Every word had to be deliberate, cutting, unforgettable. I wanted her to remember this moment for the rest of her life. I wanted her to feel the same shock I felt when I walked in on her and Nick. And when I was done, I'd walk away, leaving her standing there, exposed for the liar she was. But until that moment, I had to keep playing my part. I had to smile when she asked about flower arrangements. I had to nod when she talked about the honeymoon. I had to kiss her on the forehead every night like everything was just fine. It wasn't easy. Every time I looked at her, my stomach turned. Every time she said she loved me, I felt the bile rise in my throat. But I held it together because I knew what was coming. And I knew it would all be worth it when I saw the look on her face as her perfect wedding day turned into her worst nightmare. Revenge wasn't just about getting even. It was about making her feel what I felt. And I was going to make sure that on our wedding day, she felt it all. The morning of the wedding, everything seemed perfect, at least on the surface. Sophia woke up with that usual bright smile, kissed me good morning, and started her day like she hadn't shattered my world just a few days ago. She was buzzing with excitement, going over last-minute details with her bridesmaids and double-checking everything with the wedding planner. She was so confident, so sure this day would go off without a hitch. Her dress was hanging in the corner, glowing white and untouched, like some kind of symbol of purity that no longer existed. I watched her flit around the room, laughing, talking about how she couldn't wait to be my wife. All I could think was, if you only knew what's coming for you. Everyone else was just as clueless. My family, her family, our friends, they were all smiling, excited for the big day. Her parents were practically glowing, thinking they were about to watch their daughter start her perfect life with the perfect man. They had no idea they'd be watching her world burn in just a few short hours. I kept my cool, kept my mask on, played the loving fiancé to perfection. I cracked a few jokes with my groomsmen, smiled for the pictures, acted like any other guy getting ready to marry the love of his life. And Sophia? She had no reason to suspect anything. She thought we were on the same page, that today was going to be the best day of her life. I wasn't nervous. Not really. I had rehearsed my plans so many times in my head that it felt like I was just going through the motions, waiting for my moment. Every step I took toward the altar was one step closer to dropping the bomb that would change everything. The ceremony was set to be beautiful. The venue was perfect. This stunning outdoor garden with white chairs lined up in neat rows, an aisle covered in rose petals leading up to a floral arch where we'd exchange our vows. It looked like something out of a fairy tale she wouldn't get to keep. As I got dressed, putting on the suit I had picked out months ago with such excitement, I felt this strange calm settle over me. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. It was like I had already detached from everything, like I was watching myself go through the motions from a distance. We were just hours away now. Guests were starting to arrive, filling up the seats, talking excitedly about the day. I could hear Sophia and her bridesmaids in the other room laughing, sipping champagne. She was probably looking in the mirror, admiring how beautiful she looked in that dress, thinking about the vows she was about to say. She had no idea this day wasn't going to end the way she thought. She didn't know that the man waiting for her at the altar wasn't there to promise forever, but to tear everything apart. And as I stood there, adjusting my tie and mirror, I couldn't help but smile. The guests were seated, the music was playing, and the sun was shining just right, like the universe was in on the joke. Everything was perfect, a picture-perfect scene set for what everyone believed would be the happiest day of our lives. But as I stood there at the altar, waiting for her to walk down that aisle, all I could think about was how this day wasn't going to end the way anyone expected. I could feel the eyes of our friends and family on me. People were smiling, whispering about how good I looked in my suit, how lucky Sophia was to have found such a great guy. I could hear the rustle of dresses, the shuffling of feet as everyone settled into place, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. The officiant stood beside me, flipping through the notes for the ceremony. My groomsmen were lined up, joking quietly with each other, probably wondering if I had cold feet. Little did they know, I was the calmest person there. I wasn't nervous. No, I was ready. And then the music changed. That soft, familiar melody, the one she picked out months ago for this exact moment, the one that was supposed to signal the start of our life together. All eyes turned toward the end of the aisle. There she was. Sophia stood at the back, her arm looped through her father's, glowing in her white dress. She looked stunning, exactly the way I'd imagined she would, a real-life angel, someone who had everyone fooled. She smiled, that radiant, beautiful smile that used to make my heart race. But now it only reminded me of the lies she was living, the lie I was about to expose. As they started walking down the aisle, I forced myself to smile, to play my part just a little bit longer. Sophia looked straight at me, her eyes filled with love, completely unaware that this was her last moment of bliss before everything came crashing down. Each step she took brought her closer to the truth, closer to her downfall. Her father looked proud, walking his little girl toward what he thought was her perfect future. He had no idea what kind of woman he was handing over to me. When they reached the altar, her father smiled at me, patting me on the shoulder before stepping back. Sophia took her place beside me, beaming, her hands shaking just a little from excitement. She thought this was the moment she had dreamed of her whole life. She had no idea it was about to become a nightmare. The officiant cleared his throat, starting the ceremony. His words were a blur to me, something about love and commitment, but I wasn't paying attention. I was focused on what came next. I could feel the tension building inside me, ready to spill over, but I kept it bottled up, waiting for the right moment. That was the moment I had chosen, the moment where everyone's attention would be on us, waiting for me to declare my love for her, to make promises of forever. But instead, they were going to get the truth, all of it. As the officiant turned to me, signaling that it was time for my vows, Sophia looked at me with those wide, hopeful eyes. She squeezed my hand, her lips curving into the softest smile, like she couldn't wait to hear me say how much I loved her. But love wasn't what I was about to give her. I glanced out at the crowd, her parents, her friends, our co-workers, all watching, waiting. This was it. This was a moment. I took a deep breath, and with the microphone in my hand, I began. Before we start, I said, my voice steady, there's something I need to share with all of you. The room went still. Sophia's smile faltered just a little, confusion flickering across her face. But she didn't know. Not yet. I know today is supposed to be about love, I continued, my eyes locking with hers. It's supposed to be a celebration of trust, commitment, and loyalty. But how can I stand here and make promises when there are lies hiding beneath the surface? Sophia's hand tightened around mine, her face paling as the weight of my words began to sink in. She looked at me like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. But it was too late now. Sophia's smile had completely disappeared now. The tension in the air was thick. Every person in the room could feel it. People shifted in their seats, confused, glancing at each other, trying to figure out what was happening. I could see her bridesmaids whispering to one another, her parents exchanging worried looks. But Sophia? She just stared at me, her hand still gripping mine, like she could somehow pull me back from whatever cliff she thought I was about to jump off. But I wasn't jumping. I was pushing her off the edge. I came home a day early last week. I continued, my voice steady, clear. Sophia didn't know that. She thought I was still away, and what I walked in on. Well, let's just say it wasn't what I expected. Sophia's eyes went wide. Her grip on my hand loosened, and I felt her start to pull away, her breath coming quicker now. Panic was spreading across her face as she realized what was happening. But it was too late for her to stop it. The crowd was dead silent. Every single person was hanging on my words, trying to understand what I was saying. I turned to look at them, making sure they could all hear me clearly. This wasn't going to be some private affair anymore. This was public. This was revenge. When I walked into our house, I said, my voice rising just a little, I found Sophia in bed with another man. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People started whispering, some in shock, others in disbelief. Sophia's mother covered her mouth. Her father looked like he had been punched in the gut. And Sophia? She looked like her entire world had just shattered. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Just a small, strangled sound that didn't even make it past her lips. I wasn't done. I didn't say anything that night, I continued, locking eyes with her. I didn't confront her. I didn't make a scene. I just walked out. And since then, I've been thinking about how to handle this. Do I just call off the wedding? Do I walk away quietly and let her live with the consequences in private? But no, she didn't give me that respect. So why should I give it to her? The crowd was buzzing now, people murmuring, looking at Sophia like they didn't even know who she was. Her bridesmaids looked horrified, frozen in place, unsure what to do. Her father stood up, but her mother pulled him back down, tears already forming in her eyes. I felt my heart racing, but I didn't stop. This was what I had been waiting for, what I had planned so carefully. I turned toward the crowd and took a deep breath. And just so you all know who she was with, I said, my voice cold and sharp, it was Nick. I pointed directly at him, sitting a few rows back. The entire room turned to look at him. He went pale, his mouth slightly open, like he couldn't believe I was calling him out like this. The whispers turned into full-blown gasps, and I could feel the weight of the room pressing down on him and Sophia. Nick shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face a mask of guilt and panic. Sophia was shaking now, her eyes wide with fear and embarrassment. She tried to grab my hand again, tried to pull me close, but I stepped back, out of her reach. Nick, I said, addressing him directly now, you've been sleeping with my fiancée. You probably thought you'd get away with it. You both did. But today, in front of everyone, you're going to feel what it's like to have everything ripped away from you, just like I did. He didn't say a word. His face was white as a sheet, and the people around him were staring at him in shock, like they couldn't believe he was the guy who had just ruined everything. I turned back to Sophia, who looked like she was about to break down. Tears were starting to well up in her eyes, her chest rising and falling as she tried to keep it together. But I wasn't done yet. I was ready to marry you, I said softly, looking directly into her tear-filled eyes. I loved you. I trusted you. And you threw it all away for him. For this. You destroyed everything. Her lips trembled, and she finally spoke, barely a whisper. Derek, please. But there was no more pleading. No more chances. This wedding, I said, my voice now cold and final, is over. And with that, I dropped the microphone and walked away, leaving Sophia standing at the altar, surrounded by a crowd that no longer saw her as the bride. They saw her for what she really was, a liar, a cheater, and someone who had just lost everything in the most public, humiliating way possible. As I walked away, the weight of everything lifted off my shoulders. It was over. The secret was out, and Sophia was left standing alone, in front of everyone she loved, humiliated. I could hear the chaos erupt behind me, people gasping, whispering, trying to piece together what had just happened. Sophia's sobs echoed through the venue, a sharp contrast to the happiness that had filled the air only moments before. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to see her collapse under the weight of it all. I'd done what I came to do, but the real show, that was just getting started. As I walked out of the garden, I caught sight of Nick trying to make his escape. He was rushing down the side aisle, probably hoping no one would stop him, but he wasn't fast enough. People were already pointing, murmuring. His face was pale, his steps hurried, but there was no way he could outrun the damage. Not anymore. Sophia's father reached him first. I didn't see the punch, but I heard it, a solid crack that silenced the crowd. I stopped in my tracks and glanced back just in time to see Nick stumbling backward, clutching his face as Sophia's dad stood over him, seething. "How could you?" he shouted, his voice raw with betrayal and anger. "How could you do this to my daughter?" Nick stammered, trying to say something, trying to defend himself, but there were no excuses for this. Not here. Not now. Meanwhile, Sophia's mother had rushed up to the altar, wrapping her arms around her sobbing daughter, trying to console her, but it was useless. Sophia was broken, standing there in that white dress, tears streaming down her face, makeup smeared, looking every bit the mess she had created. Her perfect day had turned into a public nightmare, and there was no way out of it. The guests, once smiling and excited, were now a mix of stunned and disgusted. Some of them whispered harshly, shaking their heads as they stood up from their seats. The judgment was palpable. Sophia's friends, her bridesmaids, they looked torn between sympathy and shock. A few tried to comfort her, but most were backing away, unsure what to do, unsure who they were even looking at anymore. I could see the divide forming, the slow unraveling of Sophia's life right before my eyes. It was everything I had hoped for, every fake smile she had given me, every lie she had told. It was all crashing down around her, and she had nowhere to hide. Nick, now holding his bleeding nose, staggered back through the crowd, trying to escape the furious glares being thrown his way. Someone shouted at him to leave, and I watched as he stumbled out of the garden, humiliated, bruised, and alone. He was done too. But Sophia, she was still in the thick of it. She hadn't even begun to understand how much she had lost. I stood near the edge of the venue, watching as people started to leave, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others still glued to their seats, unable to process what had just happened. It was like a car crash. People couldn't look away, even though they knew it was horrible. I saw my best man, Matt, standing off to the side, his eyes wide with shock. He caught my gaze, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he shook his head slowly, walking over to me. "Derek," he started, his voice low. "Man, what the hell was that?" "That," I said, a faint smile tugging at the corner of my lips, "was me getting my life back." Matt stared at me for a moment, taking it all in, before nodding slowly. "I gotta hand it to you," he said, a little in awe. "You really pulled it off." I shrugged, feeling that sense of cold satisfaction settle in. She deserved it. He didn't argue. Instead, he glanced back at the scene, where Sophia was still being held by her mother, surrounded by a handful of people who were trying, but failing, to comfort her. "You're a stronger man than me," Matt muttered. "I don't know how you kept it together this long." I chuckled, though there wasn't much humor in it. "Believe me, it wasn't easy." He nodded again, and we stood there for a moment in silence, watching the chaos from a distance. Sophia's life was unraveling in front of everyone, just like I'd planned. The whispers, the glares, the questions. All of it was starting to consume her. There was no fixing this, no undoing the damage. She was exposed, and now she had to live with it. I turned to Matt and clapped him on the shoulder. "Let's get out of here," I said, already feeling done with the whole spectacle. I had seen enough. As we walked away, I didn't look back again. I didn't need to. Sophia's world had fallen apart, and there was no coming back from this. She had lost everything: her future, her reputation, her friends. And me? I walked away with a strange sense of closure. I wasn't happy exactly, but I felt free. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. Revenge wasn't sweet. It was cold, calculated, and brutal. But it was exactly what she deserved. Matt and I didn't talk much as we left the venue. I could tell he didn't know what to say, and honestly, I didn't need to hear anything from him. The silence was enough. I'd done what I set out to do: expose Sophia for who she really was, make her pay for everything she had done. But I wasn't sure what came next. Later that night, after everything had fallen apart, I sat alone in my apartment. The same apartment that was supposed to be ours. I looked around at the half-packed boxes, the remnants of the life we were supposed to build together, and it all felt so far away now, like a different version of me had lived here, in some other life that no longer existed. My phone buzzed on the table, breaking the silence. At first, I ignored it, not wanting to deal with the fallout any more than I already had. But the buzzing didn't stop. Call after call, text after text. It didn't take long for word to spread about what had gone down. Sophia's friends, people from the wedding, even family members were trying to reach out, wanting to know more, wanting to know why. I wasn't interested in talking. But then a new text came in, this time from a number I knew too well: Sophia. My stomach tightened as I stared at the screen, unsure whether I even wanted to open it. Finally, curiosity got the better of me, and I swiped to read the message. "Sophia, Derek, please. We need to talk. I know you're angry, but we can fix this. I love you. I made a mistake, but I don't want to lose you. Please call me. I'm begging you, asterisk." I felt nothing. Her words were empty now, just like her promises had been. She thought this was something we could patch up, like it hadn't just exploded in front of everyone we knew. I shook my head and set the phone back down, not even bothering to reply. She wasn't my problem anymore. As the night dragged on, I found myself scrolling through social media, watching as bits and pieces of the disaster started to leak out. People were already talking. Some of the wedding guests had posted vague statuses about unbelievable drama or how they couldn't believe what had happened. It was only a matter of time before the full story got out, and once it did, Sophia's life would be shattered even more than it already was. But that was her burden to bear now. Over the next few days, the fallout spread like wildfire. I stayed low, keeping to myself while everything unfolded. Word got out fast about the affair, about what happened at the wedding, about how I exposed her in front of everyone. I didn't have to say anything. The story seemed to tell itself. Sophia, though, she was drowning. I started hearing from mutual friends, people I hadn't expected to reach out, asking if I was okay, telling me how sorry they were that I had gone through this. But then the stories about Sophia started pouring in. How her parents had completely cut her off, furious and humiliated by the public scandal. How her friends were avoiding her, ashamed to be associated with the spectacle. Even her co-workers had found out. Someone from the wedding must have spread the word, and now her professional life was starting to crumble too. It wasn't just a personal fallout. Her career took a hit as well. Sophia had worked hard to build a reputation for herself in her field, and now all of that was being overshadowed by the scandal. People talk, especially in tight circles, and soon enough, her spotless image was stained with rumors of infidelity, betrayal, and the public humiliation that followed. Her life was falling apart piece by piece, just like I had planned. And Nick, he didn't fare much better. He vanished almost immediately after the wedding, too embarrassed to show his face anywhere near our social circles. People who had once been close to him turned their backs, disgusted by what he'd done. His job, his friends, everything started slipping away from him just as fast as it had for Sophia. He tried to reach out to me once, a pathetic apology through a text message. I deleted it without reading it. There was nothing he could say that would change anything. For Sophia, though, things were worse. A few weeks after the wedding, that wasn't. I heard through the grapevine that she had moved out of town, unable to handle the judgment, the whispers, the cold looks from people she used to be close to. Her life here was over, and she knew it. I'd imagined this moment for days. Hell, for weeks. But now that it was here, now that I'd destroyed everything she'd built, I realized something. I didn't feel satisfied. Not really. I didn't feel the rush of victory I thought I would. I just felt hollow. Sure, I got my revenge. I made sure she lost everything. Her reputation, her future, her friends. But in the end, it didn't change what she had done. It didn't erase the pain or the betrayal, or the fact that the person I thought I'd spend my life with had broken me in a way I couldn't put back together. Revenge doesn't fix the past. It just scorches the earth so nothing can grow.